Good evening, everyone. My name is John Lemniaris. I'm the Technical Director of Lakeshore Soccer. Tonight, we will discuss part of our technical plan, and part of this plan will include multi-sport athletes, management of our players that are involved in other sports, program offered to all of our members, player evaluation and progress, and of course, a proper environment. So these are points that you will see throughout the presentation. So we begin. Our structure for training and the CDC program, which is basically a program from U4 to U12. You will see the various age groups that we're talking about: 4v4, 5v5, 7v7 on the U4s and U6, U7s, U8s, U9s, up to U12, of course. Our training format will likely be 100% in a station. In other words, players will be divided with a coach per the ratio of the CDC requirements. So it will be 100% in stations, U7, U8, U9, and U10. And then from the U11 to U12, it will be 50% in stations and 50% in different drills, phases of play, and so on and so forth. The number of weeks for each program, the U4s will be 12 weeks in total. As far as or close to 15 weeks. And for the older group, starting from U8 to U12, it will be a 40-week program that will have its rest periods and so on and so forth, as we will discuss in the periodization in another document. The sessions per week will be 2 sessions for the U4s to U6, so a practice and a game. The same for the U7s, and for the U8s will be 3 sessions, so 2 sessions and a game, the same as the U9s and the U10s. The U11s and U12s will have 3 sessions and a game in the 40 weeks. Coaches, obviously all the coaches will be certified as per the requirements that are needed in the CDC, so they have to have a certain certification, which you'll see in the presentation, the S3, the C license, and so on as they get older. The same thing, and some of the certifications that will be needed will for the technical director and the technical coordinators is the license C and above, along with the youth and children's courses, depending on the age that you'll be coaching. And finally, the coaches ratio in the U4s will be 1 coach or multiple coaches for a group of 6. In the U7s will be 1 for 8, so 1 coach per 8 players. Same thing for the U8s. The U9s, it changes, it's 1 for 10 players. And the same for the U10, 1 per 10. And for the 11 and 12s will be 1 to 12 players. So the ratio of 1 coach per 12 players. And if it is in a station, so you'll have 1 or 2 coaches per the ratio that's required. Moving on, multi-sport athletes is certainly something that we all are aware of, we're conscious of. We have multiple players that play in different sports throughout the year, as it is recommended by experts. So our club is certainly in favor of multi-sport athletes, and we comply with the experts that say that this is a positive thing for their development as people. The CDC allows for these athletes, or for these multi-sport athletes, because they get to choose on how much they would like to participate in our sport. So they have a choice of 1 week, 2 weeks, or once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week, depending on which other sports they also play. We do accommodate our schedule as well to fit the multi-sport athletes. In the past, our attendance was 50%, or approximately 50% during the winter and 100% during the summer, to try to accommodate these athletes. And of course, we give them rest periods in the periodization for them to have the ability to rest and relax between the sports, and for the volume and workload. We periodically meet with other members of other sports in order to discuss how we can handle and how we can manage multi-sport athletes, especially in our case, especially hockey, which is obviously a lot of our athletes play both soccer and hockey. So we meet with them to try to work on the workload and the scheduling. And of course, the multi-sports, as I said originally on this slide, is that multi-sport athletes is a challenge for the players, the parents, and of course the clubs to try to accommodate as much as we can, because we're all in favor for it. Moving along, athlete workload and management in the various soccer programs that are involved. So again, all the below, or all what's mentioned in the presentation, is in our periodization plan. Okay, our athletes that are training in various other programs is a lot like multi-sport athletes, except that they're doing one sport. So we try to manage the workload in those other programs. The tech staff and I periodically meet with the responsible of these other programs in order for us, again, to work on the players' workload, how much do they do, what do they do there, so what we can adjust to what we do here, and of course when injuries occur, to see what the recovery is and what one program does varies to ours. We always try to adjust to the other programs. Okay. As an example, the players that are in the Sportitude regional program, our technical staff creates a rotation system. In other words, for them to be able to rest and take time off, as it is in the periodization, so that their workload is not overly done, and of course they don't have a burnout. For the older players that are involved in the CNHP program, I personally communicated with the federation staff in order to know what they're working on, and we also provide our periodization schedule, so they're aware what our players that are involved in their program do, and vice versa. We have plenty of players that play on the national team. We're fortunate enough to have many players that play in the national team, and there we follow what their guidelines are as far as these players when they go to camp, when they go to the World Cup or qualifyings. So we adjust to what they want. So whenever they go to camp, we try to adjust prior, during, and after the competition for these players to be at their utmost and to recover at their utmost. The most important point to this is that common sense is to make sure that their athletes are in the best possible performance peak, and of course to assure their well-being. The athlete's progression process. This is the evaluation process that we do throughout the entire year. We have 3 steps. Step 1 is player self-evaluation. So the player is given a form that he self-evaluates. So he writes what he thinks his progress is. The second one is the tech staff and the coaches do an evaluation with the player. Okay, so what the coaches think of how the player is progressing. And then we also have one for the coaches, for us to evaluate the coaches, and one for the coaches themselves. So it goes in 3 steps. Player self-evaluation. The tech staff does an evaluation with the players to see the progress, and the coaches also do one with the players, and we also have one for us as coaches, as technical staff, to evaluate the coaches. So here we go. This is an example of the athlete's self-evaluation sheet, and as you can see, there's various points here that the athlete is looking at, and then they'll rate themselves from 1 to 5. Obviously, in most cases, the athletes put a very high score on what they do, but we try our best to make them understand that they're still in a development process. This is the coach's evaluation sheet for the athletes. So in other words, when the coaches and the technical staff meet with the players, this is what our evaluation form looks like. So we sit down and we discuss every one of these points with the athletes, and of course, get their feedback. And this is the evaluation that the technical staff uses to evaluate our coaches. Okay? So these are just examples of what we use. Appropriate environment. This is something that's extremely important. It's something that the CDC, with the CDC requirements, their philosophy, the objective, allows to promote a proper environment for all the players and coaches. Above all, a fun and safe experience. Development based with high standards to provide the same quality services for all the participants. Everyone has the opportunity to be coached by everyone, so it's no longer categories and coaches just coaching a certain group. The other good thing about the CDC program is that players, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they're allowed to choose on how many times they come to train, so they can choose to train once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week. There's no more selections, and there's no more categories. So in other words, we don't select players. Whoever wants to inscribe comes in, and they all train and play as a group instead of dividing them within categories and teams alone. The proper environment also includes structured themes, working stations, ratio of players and coaches, as I mentioned in the CDC program. Quality and quantity of equipment, that's also very important to make sure that we have all the equipment that's necessary. Of course, quality fields, putting the players in the best possible fields. In other words, we try to use as turf as much as possible because it creates the best environment for our country and for our temperature and so on and so forth for the winter. And it's a program that's challenging, educational, it's interactive, it's inclusive, progressive, and very expressive. So in other words, it allows for all of these things to happen, which creates, as far as we're concerned, the best possible environment. Thank you very much.